Welcome to Autism Knows No Borders, a podcast where people connected to autism inspire change and build community. Together with the Global Autism Project, I'm your host, Rachel Harmon, a professional with over a decade of experience in the field of autism services, outreach, and advocacy. Why are so many autistic females late diagnosed? If you've ever asked this question yourself, listen to Olivia Hops, a late-diagnosed autistic self-advocate and YouTuber from California, explain some of the possible reasons. This episode is part 1 of my conversation with Olivia, which was originally released on March 3rd, 2022. Olivia is the owner of Unbaked Bar, an online edible cookie dough shop, and her mission is to help autistic adults become successful business owners. She also uses her YouTube channel to spread awareness of how autism presents differently for females. Among other things, we discuss Olivia's journey of being diagnosed with autism at age 24, the underdiagnosis of females on the spectrum, some ways in which Olivia masked while growing up, how autism affects her daily life, and building a business as an autistic adult. In this episode, discover what's possible when you mix your own batter. And now, I present you, Olivia Hops. Hi, Olivia. Welcome to Autism Knows No Borders. Thanks for being here today.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Let's start with a brief introduction.
Sure. My name is Olivia. I'm 26 years old. I live in San Diego, California. I own my own business, and I was diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder 2 years ago in January 2020. And it was the best day of my life because my whole life I've wondered why I am the way I am, why my brain works the way it does, and I've been searching for answers to those questions. And when I was finally diagnosed, my whole life made sense. So yes, ever since then, my life's been much easier and just makes more sense now.
Yeah, well, that's great that you were able to find that out about yourself and feel some validation.
Yes, absolutely. Huge validation and like a total weight lifted off my shoulders and my mom's shoulders because she always thought, that she did something wrong or something as a parent. So I think she might have been even more excited that day than I was.
What are some examples of ways that you did feel validated? Like, what was it like for you growing up? And how did you maybe think something was different? Could you give some of those examples?
Sure. So growing up, when I was really little kid, I would have lots of temper tantrums, my mom thought, over seemingly small things that didn't make sense. Like I would be playing with a toy and something would go wrong with the toy and I would just have a complete what we now know was a meltdown. And I continued to have those all the way up. I mean, I still have them, but into adulthood. And I remember one day just having a meltdown over something so small, minuscule. And I was like, I don't think this is normal. I don't think other people who are in their early 20s are doing this over something that seemed kind of silly. And so getting the diagnosis and realizing that I couldn't help having meltdowns and they weren't temper tantrums, there was nothing that I could control, was probably like the most validating. And another was I could never stick with something for long. I would dive into something, whether it was a job or a hobby or whatever it was, 150 million%. And then I would get burned out really quickly. And I didn't understand. I was like, other people can go have a regular job and be in the same profession for long periods of time. And I just couldn't do that. And so again, when I found out that that was a trait of autism, it again made me feel like I just wasn't so weird or crazy, I guess. It was just very validating. And like another just funny example of a meltdown when I was a kid, I was at my grandparents' house for the day and I had really bad separation anxiety from my mom. So I probably already wasn't in the best of moods. And then they were giving my sister and I some donuts, and they cut the donut in half. And I had a complete meltdown because I apparently didn't want half a donut. I wanted a whole donut. So it was just like silly things like that, that my mom didn't understand. I didn't understand as I got older, that with the diagnosis, finally, those things made perfect sense.
Mm. What made you finally decide to seek out the assessment? Did something happen?
Yes. So back in, I can't even think of what, I think it was 2018, my best friend all growing up, Megan, was graduating from college, and she's now in med school. She's always wanted to be a doctor her whole life. And she was graduating just from like college and then applying to med school. And so I flew up to Washington State, where she was graduating from, to go to her graduation. And after the graduation, her family, and she had a bunch of extended family there, and I went to dinner to celebrate. And I sat across from her aunt that I didn't really know very well. I had seen her a couple times and then just kind of formally met her that earlier that day. And so at dinner, I was sharing my whole life story, which I love to do. And I like cannot tell a short story, and I'll just give every single detailed information. I have like no boundaries or shame, which now makes sense that I'm autistic, but I didn't know that at the time. So I'm saying like, oh yeah, I've been diagnosed with anxiety and depression, and I've done this and this and like all this stuff. And I could tell when I was saying the story that she was like kind of looking at me, I don't know, like not weirdly, but I could tell like she was just like really like intensely listening. And so when I was done babbling, she asked if she could ask me a question. And she said, "Don't get offended, but have you ever been assessed for autism?" And I wasn't offended because nothing really offends me. I was intrigued because nobody had ever brought that up. And at that time, I didn't even really know what autism was. The only thing I knew about it was, at the time, I had a young man who was or is a year younger than me, helping me work at my cookie dough business, who is autistic, and I'm nothing like him. And so I was just so intrigued because nobody had ever brought this up. But she said, my daughter, who is 5 years younger than me, so she was 17, I believe, at the time, was just diagnosed, and you remind me a lot of her.
Mm.
And so when I got back to my hotel room that night and it was late, I Googled autism and girls, and it was like I was reading about myself. It was just like check, 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 check. It was the coolest thing. And I was like, wow, this could be something. I could be onto something. And it was so hard to turn my mind off that night and go to sleep because I needed to get up early to go to the airport the next day. And I was just like, I couldn't sleep. I tried, but I couldn't sleep. I was so excited because something finally was making sense. And unfortunately, it took me another year and a half from that point to seek the diagnosis, because when I got home, I told my therapist, my weekly talk therapist, about it. And she immediately said there was no way, because I could hold a conversation with her, and just very stereotypical things now, hearing from so many other, especially women on the spectrum, that their doctors said, oh, there's no way, because like basically you seem normal because we can mask so well. And so I was so embarrassed after telling my therapist and getting that rejection. I remember I went home and I told my boyfriend, Alex, I was like, I have to find a new therapist. I can never show my face there again. I don't know how I could be so wrong. And I kind of I tried to stop thinking about it after that. And then my good friend, Todd, who is a sports journalist. And I used to be a sports journalist, and that's how I met him. But he's also a therapist. And so I remember a few months later, I asked him, and he again said, oh, there's no way, because like you seem to be able to socialize well. And so because I know him very well, I was able to push back a little that I didn't do with my therapist. And I said, are the traits weighted? Because if I have seemingly almost every other trait of autism, minus that I can hold a conversation or socialize seemingly fine, would that mean that I'm not autistic? And he said, no, the traits aren't weighted. And so that made me excited again. And then on my 24th birthday, I was living in LA at the time. My mom and dad came to visit me, and my mom and I went to breakfast, and something came up about autism. And I hadn't brought it up in a long time. And I go, do you think I'm autistic? And without a hesitation, she said, oh, 1000%. And so I was taken aback by that. And I was like, oh, wow, I didn't realize. And she had bought books, kind of unbeknownst to me, about girls on the spectrum. And she's like, oh, I have zero doubt that you're autistic. And so I think literally when I got home on my birthday that day, I went and looked up doctors in the area. And I think it was about a week or two after that that I got in and was officially diagnosed.
Oh, okay. Why do you think your mom didn't tell you about that, about how she was doing some research on her own?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I told her about it, I think maybe like a month or so after initially being told to look into it. And I was scared to bring it up to her because I didn't want her to get upset or offended or something, like I was saying there was something wrong with me. And she didn't think that at all. And she was very intrigued, and she had said was going to like look into it, but then she never really told me that she had bought books and was really looking into it. Why that is, I'm not entirely sure. Maybe she knew that because I come obsessive with things, maybe she didn't want me to become obsessed with it, but I really don't know. I've never asked her.
That's interesting. Wonder if maybe she also wanted you to figure it out on your own whenever you were ready.
Sure, absolutely, because she has always been really supportive with all that I've done. And she definitely doesn't like to push. She likes me to figure things out and do things on my own. So that absolutely could be a possibility. I'll have to ask her later today because now I'm curious.
Yeah. Hey, Rachel here. Are you enjoying this episode? Be sure to subscribe and come back next week for part 2 of my conversation with Olivia Hops. And now, back to Olivia. So, you touched a little bit on the fact that a lot of females go misdiagnosed or they're diagnosed later in life. Could you talk a little bit about why this is so common?
I think it's so common for two reasons. One, because the traits of autism present themselves normally. And of course, there's exceptions, but usually they present themselves differently in girls than they do boys. And on top of that, we can mask them so well. We learn how to adapt. And because we can mimic our peers so well, that we appear to be just like any other girl our age. And usually we're very intelligent. So if we're doing good in school, there's no really a reason for a teacher to be like, well, there's nothing wrong with this girl. She's a straight A student like I was. No teacher ever thought anything. And it's just a bad combo because our traits are presented differently. And so many medical professionals are still kind of learning how autism presents itself in females. And it seems that there's very few doctors who really understand and can see how the traits present themselves in girls and women. And so the combo of the doctors being uneducated, not like it's their fault or anything, but them not being quite educated enough, the symptoms presenting differently and sometimes even less because we mask them so well. It's just a bad combo.
Got it. What are some of these general differences of how autism presents itself differently for males and females? And I know that, there are probably a lot of nuanced gray areas and some overlap even, but what would you say are some of those really big differences?
Sure. I think the main difference is that usually girls can socialize seemingly fine a lot of the times because, like I was saying, we're really good at mimicking our peers. And I'm not a doctor, so I'm not sure why it seems that girls are better at doing that than our male counterparts, but we're so good at just kind of fitting in and going with the social flow. And I think it goes back to just how women are kind of in society supposed to be more social than men, and we're supposed to go out and have friends and talk and stuff like that, whereas it's just a stereotype, I think, in society that women are supposed to do that. So from a young age we're kind of taught, even if it's not on purpose, but we're taught that, oh, like my mom or my friend or whatever, they're talking, they're doing this, they're doing that, they're asking how each other is. And so you just kind of mimic that. And a lot of times girls will have scripts that will go over in our head, like, oh, make sure to ask this and this, because we usually don't like small talk because we don't understand why people do it. We rather just like get to, the juicy bits and the stuff that's important rather than doing some small talk. So I know that when I'm out and I go and see somebody, like I'm supposed to ask how they are, and I'm supposed to ask, what's new in their life, and I'm supposed to ask what they're doing with their life, where that normally wouldn't be something that came to me. And I think males, when they go and see a buddy or something, they don't usually small talk anyways. So I think that's one of the big differences. Another difference is our special interests, at least from what I've read. Like girls can be very interested in similar things. Girls our age would be interested. So like when we're growing up, we could be really interested in animals, horses, clothes, fashion, makeup, stuff like that, which other girls our age are really interested in. But our interest in them goes way beyond. It's way more intense. It's way more obsessive. But again, because, oh, she's just playing with her dolls or her horses, that's a normal thing for a young girl to do. Whereas males, again, this is a stereotype, but often they're really interested in, math or science or machines and stuff like that, where as even though that's more typical for a male, it's so stereotypical of autism that it stands out. And they go, oh, well, this boy's really, really, really interested in trains or something. Let's get him tested for autism. Whereas girls were more interested in things that just blend right in.
I see. You also mentioned masking. So, what are some ways that you masked growing up or that you still mask today?
Yes. So since being diagnosed, I've tried really hard to stop masking, but I haven't quite figured out how to do that yet. So for me, growing up, masking looked like me mimicking people's hairstyles, makeup, clothing, because that was not something that came natural to me. And I was never really into that. And so I usually was dressed really like a guy, very tomboyish, but I knew like if I saw a classmate who had her hair a certain way or was wearing a certain piece of clothing or their makeup was done a certain way, I would copy them. Because a lot of people, I guess I should first say, think of masking as just being like what we're saying, but it goes so much deeper than that. It can be our appearance, how we talk, what we say. I even masked with my writing. I would copy other girls in my classes' writing styles. And so my writing changed almost every year growing up in school. I had a different style of writing with whatever one I thought was the best at the moment. And then with social things, I knew that as I was supposed to go to my friend's birthday party, even though I would have really rather died. I hated social events. I knew I was supposed to go to sleepovers or that I was supposed to invite people over for sleepovers. So even though people think masking is like literally, oh, like I'm pretending to smile or make eye contact or say certain things, which that absolutely is the case. It goes much deeper than that. And something that I also do sometimes with masking is, in the past, I've gotten better at it, is I would mimic people's like accents, not on purpose. It just, whoever I was around, I would start saying phrases like they would. And I don't know who I could have possibly been around. And I don't hear it, but there's been a handful of people throughout my like teen and adult life that have asked if I was from the South.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah, and I said, yeah, from the South of California, not not the actual South, because apparently they thought I had a Southern accent, which I don't hear at all. But maybe there's some words that I was copying somebody. I'm not sure. But yeah, those are some examples of how I've masked.
Okay. And it's interesting that, because as you're describing some of this, I think a lot of people can relate to them. Like, not just autistic people, but, we talked on this podcast before about how everyone masks.
Mm-hmm.
Like, even with the example of copying accents, I know that when I'm around my dad for long enough, he's from Tennessee, I
Okay.
start to get a little bit of a Southern drawl
A
too.
little twang.
Yeah, yeah. But I guess what a lot of people have shared is that it's just a lot more extreme for autistic people, and it's tiring, and you get that burnout from having to do it so often.
Yes, absolutely. Because like you were saying, absolutely everybody masks to an extent at certain times, but it seems like when you're autistic, you're masking almost all the time. And a lot of times we don't know who we really are without our masks. And
Mm,
when I was diagnosed, I remember kind of going through that phase of going, I don't even know who I am because I don't know what I'm like without my masks. And I still am kind of trying to figure out who I exactly am without the masks. But yeah, I think that would be the difference. Like you mentioned, it's more extreme and it's more often. I mean, there's never a time that I'm not masking unless I'm around my, immediate family or my boyfriend. But even a trip to the grocery store, the gas station, just seemingly like little things that people wouldn't think twice about. I'm thinking about how I need to act and how I need to mask and blend in.
hmm Could you give an example of times when you are being authentic, like with your boyfriend or your family, just so we can understand the distinction?
Yeah. So with my boyfriend, I don't care what he thinks about me because I know that he loves me for who I am and my family too. And it's not that I really care what people think about me because I've never been somebody who's like really obsessed with that. But I'm still, I guess, I want to make sure that I'm appearing in a way that seems normal, quote unquote, which does make it seem like I care, but it's really, I don't care, but I'm kind of more like trying to act normal, like for their sake almost, if that makes sense, because I want them to feel comfortable in whatever setting we're in. So if I'm out to dinner with somebody that I don't know very well, I want to make sure they're comfortable. And I kind of put my needs behind their needs and don't pay attention to my needs. If I'm very uncomfortable, that's okay because they're comfortable. But with my family, I can just say what I want, talk about my opinions and what I really think and laugh. I love laughing. And it's not that I don't laugh all the time, but especially with my family, I'm making jokes and I'm laughing, where when I'm out in public or with somebody that I don't know very well, I tend to be more shy. And that's a very big thing with autistic girls as well, as we tend to be very shy, which is again just a very like typical thing for young girls to be often, is to be shy. So that again just makes it go under the radar because we're again very similar with our neurotypical counterparts, but it just, like you mentioned, goes to an extreme.
Got it. How does autism affect your everyday life today?
So I'd say the biggest thing that it affects is my motivation. I struggle with burnout a lot. I struggle with burnout in my job. And so just getting up and trying to earn a living is really exhausting. And I know there are so many people that don't like their job. It's not, inclusive to only autistic people, but we can really struggle with just being able to get ourselves up and out the door. And so I actually had to quit what I thought was my dream job. I didn't like it. I didn't like it because it turns out I was autistic and I didn't like the social aspects and just the executive functions that I wasn't good at and the socializing. And so I had to start my own business, which has been incredible and it's been successful, and it allows me to work by myself and make a living and not have to stress about punching a clock or anything like that. But I'd say that's the biggest thing, is just getting up, because even with my own business, I'm now burnt out on it. It's been almost 7 years since I started it, and I want to move on to the next thing. And I think just anxiety as well. I'm very anxious to go out into public, like ever. If I have to leave my house, I usually want to do it in the morning, because for some reason in my brain, the morning is calmer and there's less people out than like in the afternoon. I really, unless I absolutely have to, won't go out in the afternoon. And so it's like, it just like seems like seemingly small things, but they add up, I think, because when I do have to go out, I have to mask, and that's exhausting. I think the overall thing is that it's exhausting because our brain seems to be working kind of in overdrive, and our brain has to think and use more energy than a neurotypical person to get through our day. And so I'm always tired. I need to take naps almost every day just to get through my day. So I'd say those are really the most debilitating things about my autism that I deal with on a daily basis.
Okay. Do you have any supports in place to cope with the anxiety or even the meltdowns that you were talking about?
Yes. So thankfully, I've gotten a structure down with my business to make it as easy and least anxiety inducing as possible. So I only work 3 days a week, and I work pretty short days. And so this allows me to be able to take a nap so that I can be refreshed and to get through my evening and get through the next day. And being able to have off time is so important. So with my business, I actually take 3 months off in the summer. I close and I basically take a summer vacation. And if I wasn't able to do that, I definitely wouldn't be able to continue going. It's just a very important thing for my brain to be able to just relax and not have to think about doing certain things. And I also have my boyfriend and my family who, if they know I'm having a bad day, can make me laugh or can make sure I get my favorite food or something. So just having that support system is really good. I can, tell my boyfriend Alex anything if I'm having a bad day or something's gone wrong and I'm feel like I'm going to have a meltdown. He can usually walk me off the edge, and no one's ever been able to do that before other than him. But yeah, just being able to take breaks, sleep, and being able to have my support system is really what allows me to get through my days.
Nice. What do you like to do on your breaks when you have like an extended break in the summer, for example?
I really like to do a whole lot of nothing and just depends on what I want to be doing. I don't like to have a strict, like, I'm going to do this or that, because that makes me more anxious. Like if I decide that I don't want to do it, but I love watching TV shows. I love writing. I love writing fiction. So I have written a few fiction books. So I will definitely do that in the summer when I have time. I'll write new stories. I love arts and crafts. So like making pottery or painting or stuff like that, I love doing as well. So just really a lot of creative stuff, I'd say, is what I like most.
Cool. Yeah, and that's related to your cookie dough business, which we'll get into in a little bit. Thanks for tuning in to Autism Knows No Borders. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe and come back next week for part 2 of my conversation with Olivia Hops, where we discuss how to manage anxiety and meltdowns. Thanks for listening. Take care.